Hello and welcome to our course on Excel 2016. My name is Toby and I am your instructor on this course. I'm based in the UK and I am a Microsoft certified professional, and one of my main specialisms is in Microsoft Excel. In fact, I'm a Moz Excel specialist. Now, I'm sure you're keen to get started on learning Excel, and we're going to get started on it as soon as possible, but I do have some very important things to tell you about in this section. If you've used Excel before, it would still be a good idea for you to follow through this section. You may be able to avoid the very last part where I talk about how to acquire and install Excel. If you already have Excel installed, you probably don't need that part. But I'd like you to stick with me for most of this section. First of all then, who is this course for? Well, primarily I've written this course for people who are completely new to Excel. Now, I do assume that you have a good basic knowledge of Windows, and I do assume that you're familiar with some of the terms I'm going to use in terms of operating a modern Windows PC. You'll understand things like keyboard shortcuts, and you may even be using a touch device. I'll come back to touch devices in just a moment. If you've used a much older version of Excel, say pre-2007, you might also find this course particularly useful because since those early versions of Excel, a lot of things have changed. For example, there's no longer a menu system. We now use a ribbon. If you've used more recent versions of Excel, say Excel 2010 or Excel 2013, the changes in Excel 2016 are mainly in more advanced topics, so in things like BI, business intelligence, and in pivot tables. There are not really many changes that affect the basics of Excel. There are one or two new features, as you'll see early on in this course, but most of the features at the basic to intermediate level have not changed substantially from Excel 2013 to Excel 2016. Also, if you've used another spreadsheet product and you'd really like to learn Excel, many of the features of that other spreadsheet product will probably be very similar to Excel. So, for example, you'll be familiar with the ideas of rows and columns and cells. But it is important that you follow through this course systematically, because it's the details where products tend to differ. And whereas in another product you may be able to say, add the values of some numbers in a column in one way, in Excel it might well be completely different. So really this course is aimed at complete newcomers, people who have used other products but want to learn Excel, and people who've used much earlier versions of Excel than 2016. Now, if you have used a more recent version of Excel, I will try to point out at various times where the main new changes are so that you can pay particular attention to those. The next very important point is that particularly with Excel 2016, as with the rest of Office 2016, you now have versions of Excel which are different on different devices. So you have the conventional desktop copy of Excel, either the PC version, which is the version we're using here, or the Mac version. But you also have versions of Excel that can run on devices such as tablets, and that can also basically run in a browser, what's called the Office mobile apps, and specifically here the Excel mobile app. This course is about the desktop version of Excel.